Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves standing at the threshold of a forgotten world, older than pyramids, older than cities, and older than any written word. Imagine a place where hunters and gatherers, who carried their lives on their backs, gathered stones so heavy that even modern cranes would groan under the weight. This is Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, and tonight it becomes our doorway into the earliest known temple on Earth. But before we slip further into the shadows of time, a quick reality check. You probably won't survive this. Not literally, of course, but imagine trying to live as these ancient builders did, with no metal, no wheel, and no permanent shelter. Cold winds, scarce food, and predators on the move would have been your daily companions. Few of us, wrapped in the comforts of the modern age, would last more than a few days. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it in your corner of the world? Share it in the comments below, so we can trace our own web of connections, just as people once gathered around these ancient stones, for reasons we still don't fully understand. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We begin in the Fertile Crescent, around 9600 BCE. The last ice age has only recently ended. Glaciers are retreating, rivers are swelling, and the first green shoots of agriculture are starting to appear, though most people still live as nomadic foragers. Southeastern Anatolia, where Göbekli Tepe lies today, is a land of contrasts. Summers are blistering and dry, while winters bring cutting winds sweeping across the plateau. Wild grasses cover the hillsides, dotted with stands of oak and pistachio trees. This was not a gentle environment. It demanded resilience. People here hunted gazelles, aurochs, wild sheep and boars. They gathered almonds, pistachios, wild wheat and barley. Water came from seasonal springs and rivers that sometimes vanished into limestone sinkholes. For much of the year, survival meant walking long distances, keeping fire alive, and watching the skies for weather that could ruin a hunt or spoil gathered food. And yet, here of all places, communities chose to sink unimaginable labor into building monumental stone circles. Why? That is the mystery of Göbekli Tepe. The people who carved Göbekli Tepe had no writing system. They left no records, no instructions, no myths written down to tell us why they did what they did. But archaeology allows us to glimpse their ordinary world. A day for a young hunter might begin before sunrise. He carried a flint-tipped spear or an atlatl for launching darts. His companions scanned the hills for gazelle herds, listening for the distant snort of wild cattle. Hours of waiting under the hot sun might yield nothing, or it might bring down enough meat to feed dozens of people. The meat was roasted, dried, or boiled in hide-lined pits with hot stones. Bones were cracked open for marrow, a crucial source of fat. Women, elders, and children worked alongside in different ways. They foraged for nuts, berries, and edible roots. They knapped flint to create new blades, endlessly reshaping tools dulled by daily use. They prepared hides for clothing and carried heavy baskets of gathered plants back to seasonal camps. It was a hard life, yes, but also communal. Fires in the evening meant food shared, stories told, and tasks divided. And when word spread that something was happening on a hilltop, that stones larger than houses were being set upright, people came. Hunters, gatherers, flintwoo, urkers and carvers gathered not just to survive, but to build. Göbekli Tepe is defined by its T-shaped limestone pillars, some rising 5 to 6 meters tall and weighing up to 10 tons. Even the smaller stones would have taken dozens of people to move. How did they do it? Archaeologists believe they used stone hammers to quarry blocks from the bedrock nearby. Levers and wooden sledges likely helped slide the stones across the hillside. With enough people and time, even the heaviest block could be shifted. Imagine dozens of hands pulling on ropes of twisted plant fiber. their feet digging into soil, sweat dripping under the Anatolian sun. When a pillar reached its designated spot, it was lowered into a shallow pit. Earth and rubble were packed around its base to hold it upright. Around these great stones, circular walls of smaller limestone blocks formed enclosures, some nearly 20 meters across. And the carvings. These are what set Göbekli Tepe apart. Foxes, lions, boars, vultures, snakes, and abstract symbols cover the pillars. They are not random scratches. Each is carefully shaped, often in relief, showing hours of patient chiseling with stone tools. The figures face inward, as though watching over whatever rituals took place inside. Archaeologists find no evidence that Göbekli Tepe was lived in permanently. There are no hearths for cooking, no trash pits filled with household waste. Instead, it seems people gathered here seasonally, perhaps after spring hunts, when gazelle herds migrated, or after autumn harvests of wild grain. Picture it. Groups arriving from distant valleys, each carrying food, water, hides and tools. Tents and shelters sprang up on the hillsides. Fires flickered under the stars. At the center stood the stone circles, the heart of something larger than daily survival. Feasts may have taken place here. Archaeologists have found huge numbers of animal bones, especially gazelle, suggesting mass gatherings where dozens of animals were slaughtered at once. Grinding stones for cereals also appear, hinting at bread or porridge. Fermented drinks may even have been brewed. Some of the earliest evidence of alcohol comes from this region and time. So imagine the contrast: days of hunting and gathering, followed by nights of music, food, and ritual inside the enclosures. A hunter might look up at the stars, pillars looming around him, carvings glowing in firelight, and feel part of something larger than his fragile life. And yet, for all the detail we can reconstruct, the great question remains unanswered. Why? Was Göbekli Tepe a temple? Many archaeologists think so, a place for communal worship, long before agriculture and cities. The carvings may symbolize myths of death and rebirth, with vultures representing the soul's journey. Others suggest it was a gathering ground for scattered groups, a place where rituals helped knit small bands into larger communities. Perhaps the very act of building together forged bonds that allowed agriculture and village life to emerge soon after. Some go further, proposing it was an astronomical observatory, aligning with stars or solstices. Still others whisper about lost civilizations or knowledge too advanced for hunter-gatherers. But the truth is simple. We don't know. All we see are stones, carvings, and the traces of feasts long past. The strangest fact of all, around 8000 BCE, the builders themselves deliberately buried Göbekli Tepe. They filled the enclosures with rubble, covering their own work. It was not abandoned to decay. It was purposefully hidden. Why? Some say it was respect, closing off a sacred site when its time was done. Others argue that new ways of life, farming, villages, new rituals, made the old monuments obsolete. Covering them may have been a way to seal the past. And so, for thousands of years, the stones leapt beneath the soil until Klaus Schmidt and his team uncovered them in the 1990s. Today they rise again into the light, but the people who made them remain silent. We stand now at the threshold of human history, looking back at Göbekli Tepe and wondering, what did these stones mean to those who built them? Were they symbols of gods, ancestors, or the cosmos? Or were they simply a way for scattered families to come together, to feel less alone in a harsh world? Whatever the answer, Göbekli Tepe reminds us that even at the dawn of time, humans were more than hunters and gatherers. They were dreamers, builders, and seekers of meaning. And yet, the purpose of these pillars remains just beyond our reach. The story of Göbekli Tepe leaves us with questions about why early people raised monuments at all. But it also reminds us that much of the world they knew has been erased by time. Tonight we travel north and west, into a place that once lay between England and continental Europe, a place now drowned beneath the North Sea. It is called Doggerland, a landmass so vast that it has sometimes been called the Atlantis of the North. 10,000 years ago, it was not waves and salt water, but green meadows, forests, rivers, and the footsteps of people who thrived there. Imagine waking up not to the sound of the sea, but to the calls of red deer in the forests, the splash of fish in shallow lakes, the crackle of firewood gathered from oak groves. The North Sea today seems eternal, but in the time after the last ice age, when glaciers retreated and the climate warmed, much of what is now ocean was dry land. Doggerland stretched from modern Britain across to the Netherlands and Denmark, covering tens of thousands of square kilometers. Rivers braided across it, wetlands teemed with birdlife, and rolling hills gave vantage points to watch for prey. It was, by all evidence, a rich and livable land. The people of Doggerland lived as Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. They fashioned tools from flint, antler, and bone. A typical toolkit might include microliths, small razor-sharp blades that could be hafted into wooden shafts to create arrows or spears. For fishing, they made barbed points and hooks. For daily survival, they carried knives to butcher game, scrapers to clean hides, and chisels to shape wood. Clothing was stitched together from animal skins using sinew for thread. Fires were kindled with flint sparks caught on dried moss. Food came from many sources. Deer and wild cattle roamed in herds, offering meat, hides, and bone for tools. In rivers and lakes, fish were speared, and nets or traps may have been set in shallow waters. Birds provided eggs and feathers. Berries, nuts, and roots filled baskets in the warmer months. Hazelnuts in particular seem to have been an important staple. Archaeologists find their charred shells at many Mesolithic sites, evidence of roasting or grinding into meal. Seasonal cycles shaped everything. Spring brought migratory waterfowl. Summer provided berries and fresh shoots. Autumn gave nuts and game in abundance, and winter demanded careful storage, fat-rich foods, and fires that never went out. Life in Doggerland was not just about survival. It was about connection. Bands of families likely moved with the seasons, meeting at certain places to share food, arrange marriages, and exchange tools or stories. Around campfires, hunters told tales of animals and spirits. Children learned which plants to gather and how to track animals by prints in the mud. Elders passed on memory, describing where rivers once flowed or where storms had changed the land. To these people, the world was alive, full of animals that carried meaning, rivers that gave life, and ancestors whose spirits remained in the land around them. But the land itself was changing. After the Ice Age ended, glaciers melted at a tremendous pace. Sea levels began to rise, slowly but relentlessly. What had been meadows became marshes, and marshes became tidal flats. Families who once camped along a riverbank might return the next year to find it drowned by brackish water. Each generation watched the sea creep closer, swallowing familiar hunting grounds and forests. Archaeological evidence suggests that people adapted for centuries. They shifted to higher ground, moved camps inland, and continued to fish and hunt. But the ocean was patient. Around 8,200 years ago, a dramatic event occurred. A massive submarine landslide off the coast of Norway, known as the Storegga Slide, triggered a tsunami that swept across the North Atlantic. The waves surged into Doggerland, drowning valleys and sweeping away settlements. Though some higher ridges may have survived for a time, the event marked the beginning of the end for this lost world. Artifacts from Doggerland occasionally emerge even now. Fishing trawlers drag up mammoth tusks, reindeer antlers, and stone tools from the seabed. In the mud of tidal flats, fossilized footprints have been found, pressed into soft ground thousands of years ago by children and adults walking together. Each find is a faint echo of the people who once thrived there. In 2019, divers exploring the seabed discovered remains of a submerged forest, tree stumps still anchored in the soil where they had once grown tall above ground. The evidence paints a vivid picture. This was not a barren wasteland, but a homeland filled with life. The mystery is not only how Doggerland disappeared, But what became of the people? Did they move inland, blending with groups in what is now Britain and northern Europe? Did some cling to shrinking islands until the last high ground was gone? Were their traditions carried into farming communities that arose later? Archaeologists can only piece together fragments. There are no written records, no oral traditions preserved into later times. All that remains are the bones of animals, the tools of hunters, and the drowned landscape beneath the waves. To modernize, Doggerland seems mythical, a whole world lost to the sea, and perhaps that is why it is often compared to Atlantis. Yet unlike Atlantis, Doggerland was real, inhabited by real people whose daily lives were as ordinary and as fragile as our own. They lit fires against the cold, cared for children, and watched the tides with worry. The story of their land is a story of inevitability. The sea rose, and the people moved or perished. It is a reminder that climate has always shaped human destiny. And here lies the unresolved question. Was Doggerland merely a corridor of land, a place where people passed through on their way to Britain and Europe? Or was it a true heartland, where communities flourished for generations, perhaps even forming traditions that shaped later cultures? Each new artifact pulled from the seabed offers a clue, but never a full answer. So we are left with a haunting thought. Beneath the waves of the North Sea lies not only a lost landscape, but perhaps a lost chapter of human culture. Fields where children once played are now invisible beneath the grey waters. Forests where deer once grazed are gone, and hearths that once glowed with fire are long extinguished. The mystery of Doggerland is not only about the past, it is also about the present. As modern seas rise again with changing climate, cities may one day share the fate of this vanished land. Perhaps thousands of years from now, archaeologists of the future will wonder about us, just as we wonder about them. And as we turn from the drowned plains of Doggerland, we carry forward another question to the next part of our journey. What happens when not just a land, but an entire culture vanishes, leaving behind tools, bones, and silence, but no memory? The vanished land of Doggerland reminds us that entire worlds can disappear, swallowed not only by water, but also by time. Now we cross an ocean, back into the deep past of North America, to consider another mystery, the disappearance of the Clovis people. They were among the earliest known inhabitants of the continent, skilled hunters whose tools spread across vast distances, whose lives left behind a trail of fluted stone points buried in soil. For centuries they thrived, and then, suddenly, they were gone. Imagine walking the plains of what is now New Mexico, or Texas, or farther north into the rolling grasslands that once stretched without fences. The air is dry, the horizon wide. Herds of mammoth and bison graze in the distance, while saber-toothed cats and dire wolves lurk on the edges. Rivers cut through valleys where willows and cottonwoods grow. It is a world both familiar and alien, because the North America of 13,000 years ago held creatures that no longer exist. The people who lived here, known today as the Clovis culture, carried tools that can still be recognized at a glance by archaeologists. Their spear points were long and elegant, with a distinctive channel or flute running up from the base. That flute made it easier to secure the point to a wooden shaft, giving it greater strength and penetration. These were not crude tools. They were works of craftsmanship, carefully knapped from high-quality stone. Some materials, like obsidian or jasper, had to be carried or traded across long distances. The points speak of mobility, connection, and a people who understood the land in great detail. A typical day for a Clovis band might begin before sunrise. Hunters slipped into the grass, tracking the enormous beasts that dominated the landscape. Working together, they drove mammoths into boggy ground, where the animals could be killed with thrusting spears. Each hunt required planning, knowledge of terrain, and cooperation among many people. The reward was immense. A single mammoth could feed a group for weeks, providing meat, hides for clothing and shelter, bone for tools, and sinew for bindings. Nothing was wasted. Women, elders, and children supported these hunts in countless ways. They prepared food, dried strips of meat for storage, and scraped hides into usable leather. They gathered plants, berries, and roots, knowledge of which plants healed and which nourished, passed carefully through generations. Fires were kept burning in hearths surrounded by stone, warming camps and cooking food. Babies were carried on backs, children played with bone toys, and stories were told in the evenings. For all their difference from us, their daily lives were also deeply human, a balance of work, care, and survival. Archaeological evidence shows that the Clovis people were not confined to one place. Their tools are found from the American Southwest all the way to the Great Plains and beyond. They moved across rivers, valleys, and forests, following herds and seasons. They carried with them not only weapons, but also knowledge: where to find stone, how to read animal tracks, how to cross swollen rivers. In this way, Clovis culture spread widely, leaving its mark in soils across the continent. And yet, around 12,900 years ago, something changed. The record shows a sharp break. The distinctive Clovis points vanish from the archaeological record. Mammoths, mastodons, and many other large animals disappear. The Clovis people, so widespread and successful, seem to vanish as well. Why? That is the enduring mystery. One theory points to climate. Around this time, the Earth suddenly cooled in an event known as the Younger Dryas. Temperatures dropped, ice sheets expanded again, and ecosystems shifted. For hunters who relied on large game, the changes may have been devastating. Mammoths and mastodons, already stressed by warming climates, may have dwindled and then gone extinct. With their prey gone, Clovis lifeways could no longer continue. Another theory points to human impact. Perhaps overhunting by Clovis groups themselves helped drive the great animals to extinction. A few mammoths killed each season might be sustainable, but widespread hunting across centuries may have been too much. Without megafauna to support their way of life, the culture itself fragmented. Some suggest a more sudden catastrophe. Evidence of a layer rich in microscopic diamonds and other debris has led to a controversial idea: that a comet or meteor exploded in the atmosphere, starting massive fires, darkening skies, and wiping out animals and people alike. The evidence is debated, but the possibility adds drama to the mystery. And yet, another line of thought is quieter, less catastrophic. Perhaps the Clovis people did not vanish at all. Perhaps they simply changed. Their tools may have evolved into new forms as people adapted to new prey and new environments. Later cultures in North America may be descendants of Clovis bands who survived by shifting diets, hunting smaller animals, fishing more, or relying more heavily on plants. In this view, the disappearance is not extinction, but transformation, a cultural shift invisible in stone but present in bloodlines. The evidence is fragmentary. Archaeologists sift through sites where hearths, tools, and bones lie buried under centuries of soil. In New Mexico, mammoth bones have been found with clear-cut marks, evidence of butchering. In other places, cachemar of Clovis points suggest careful preparation for hunts that never happened. But after a certain layer in the ground, the points are gone. The story ends, or at least changes. To stand on such a site today is to feel time collapse. You may see a dry valley, with sagebrush and dust carried on the wind, but beneath your feet lies a world of hunters who lived and died here long before written history. The silence of that absence is almost palpable. What remains unresolved is whether the Clovis disappearance marks the end of a people or simply the end of a technology. Did families who once hunted mammoths watch the last of the great beasts die and adapt to new ways of life? Or did entire groups truly perish, leaving only their tools as fossils of a vanished culture? The answer matters, because it shapes how we understand resilience and loss in human history. Tonight, as we think of the Clovis, we might also think of how fragile human lifeways are. A shift in climate, a change in food sources, or a sudden disaster can alter everything. The Clovis story is not only about the past, it is also about us. Our own ways of life, however secure they feel, may be just as temporary in the long arc of time. And so, the mystery remains. The Clovis points, elegant and sharp, lie silent in the soil, their makers long gone. Whether they vanished in fire, in hunger, or in change, we do not know. All we can say is that a once thriving culture passed into silence, leaving behind tools but no voices, a presence felt but not explained. As we leave their world behind, we carry forward yet another unresolved thought. How do whole cultures disappear so completely that all we see are fragments, while the people themselves fade beyond recognition? That question leads us to our next mystery, where another people carved their presence into stone in ways equally enigmatic. The Clovis people leave us with questions about how entire lifeways can vanish, but their disappearance is not the only enigma from the deep past. Thousands of years later, and thousands of miles south, another puzzle takes shape in the humid forests of Central America. Here, scattered across the soil, lie great stone spheres, some small enough to carry in your hands, others as large as cars. They are perfectly round, eerily precise, and strangely silent. Known today as the stone spheres of Costa Rica, they remind us that mysteries are not only about things that disappear, but also about things that remain, heavy and inexplicable, long after their makers are gone. Picture yourself walking through a clearing in the dense jungle. The air is thick with humidity. Cicadas shrill in the background, and the smell of damp earth rises with every step. Vines hang from trees, and bromeliads cling to branches overhead. In the midst of this wild growth sits a smooth grey sphere of stone, its surface weathered but unmistakably carved by human hands. It rests on the ground, half sunk in soil, as though the forest itself has been trying to swallow it back. These spheres first came to widespread attention in the 1930s, when workers from the United Fruit Company were clearing land for banana plantations in the Diquís Delta region of southern Costa Rica. Bulldozers and fire stripped away the forest, and suddenly dozens of stone orbs were revealed, scattered across fields and ridges. Some were dynamited in search of gold, a rumor that spread quickly but proved false. Others were rolled aside, buried, or left in place. Over time, archaeologists began to recognize them as one of the most unusual archaeological legacies of pre-Columbian Central America. There are hundreds of these spheres, ranging in size from just a few centimeters to more than 2 meters in diameter. Some weigh only a few kilograms, while the largest can weigh over 15 tons. Most are made of gabbro, a hard volcanic rock similar to basalt, though some are of limestone or sandstone. The remarkable thing is their precision. Many are nearly perfect spheres, their surfaces smoothed with astonishing care, as if their makers had some way of measuring roundness with a degree of accuracy that seems improbable without modern tools. How were they made? The process is still debated. One likely method involved roughing out a boulder with hammer stones, then gradually grinding and pecking it into shape with smaller tools. To achieve a near-perfect sphere required patience, labor, and an eye for balance. Some researchers suggest that heat and water may have been used to help fracture and smooth the surface. However it was done, the work demanded coordination and skill, and it was repeated again and again, producing not just 1 or 2 spheres, but hundreds. Equally mysterious is their placement. Some spheres were found alone, others in clusters. A few appear to have been arranged in lines or triangles, as though marking directions or boundaries. In one case, 4 spheres were discovered aligned in a straight row. In another, they formed a curve. Were these patterns intentional, or were the spheres simply moved and rearranged over centuries by people who no longer remembered their original purpose? The people who made them belonged to the Diquí culture, which flourished in the region between about 700 and 1500 CE, long before the arrival of Europeans. They built settlements, raised mounds, and worked gold into ornaments of birds, jaguars, and shamans. They were farmers and artisans, living in villages connected by trade networks that stretched into other parts of Central America. The stone spheres seem to have been part of this cultural landscape. though exactly what role they played is unknown. Daily life for the Diki would have been shaped by the rhythms of the rainforest. Families planted maize, beans and squash in cleared fields. They fished rivers and hunted small animals like peccary and agouti. Children helped gather firewood, carry water and tend crops, while elders passed on stories and rituals. Rain fell in torrents during the wet season, swelling rivers and flooding lowlands, while the dry season offered time to repair houses, weave mats, and prepare fields. Amid these ordinary cycles of work, the great task of shaping stone spheres took place, a task that had no immediate survival benefit, but must have carried deep meaning. Were the spheres symbols of power? Some scholars think they marked the residences of chiefs or important community spaces. Were they connected to the cosmos? Their alignments might suggest astronomical observations, though evidence is fragmentary. Were they simply expressions of artistry, a way of demonstrating mastery over difficult material? Or did they embody spiritual beliefs, representing the sun, the moon, or the perfection of the heavens? The truth is hidden. The Spanish conquest of the 16th century shattered many indigenous societies in Central America, and the Diki were no exception. Diseases, warfare, and colonization erased much of their culture. Oral traditions that might have explained the spheres were lost. All that remains are the stones themselves, mute and unyielding. Standing before one today, you may notice how it changes the space around it. A round boulder in the jungle seems out of place, commanding attention. Its very shape resists nature. Trees grow tall, vines twist and coil, rivers meander. But the sphere is perfect, balanced, unchanging. It does not belong to the randomness of the forest. It belongs to intention, to human hands. That sense of otherness may be part of why they were made. The legacy of the spheres today is complex. Many have been moved to museums, town squares, and private gardens. Others remain where they were found, partly buried in fields or hidden in the undergrowth. In 2014, the stone spheres and related archaeological sites of the Diquis Delta were designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognizing their importance as symbols of a vanished culture. They are treasured as national icons in Costa Rica, appearing in art, literature, and even currency. Yet their meaning is still debated. Some see them as territorial markers, some as symbols of rank, others as representations of celestial bodies. Without texts, we cannot know. All we can do is stand before them, as people did centuries ago, and wonder. Unlike Göbekli Tepe or Doggerland, the mystery of the stone spheres is not about something lost beneath soil or sea. It is about what remains, and how much meaning can slip away, even when the objects themselves endure. The stones are solid, heavy, and real. But the culture that made them, the beliefs that shaped them, and the voices that explained them are gone. This is the lesson of the spheres. Human hands can shape rock into perfection, but human stories are fragile. Without care, they vanish. What survives is the object, stripped of its original meaning, waiting for others to imagine what it might have meant. And so, as we conclude this first journey through prehistoric mysteries, we carry with us a reflection. Across Göbekli Tepe, Doggerland, the Clovis people, and the spheres of Costa Rica, we have seen how much can be built, how much can be lost, and how much remains unexplained. These were not people so different from us. They faced hard climates, shifting lands, uncertain futures. They dreamed, built, and adapted, but time erases, and what is left to us are stones, bones, and silence. The prehistoric world speaks in fragments, and we listen in echoes. The true stories are gone, but the mysteries remain. That is their enduring power, to remind us that history is larger than our memory, and that behind every fragment lies a world we will never fully know. The prehistoric world leaves us with questions of origins, of how humans first gathered, built, and dreamed. But as we step forward in time into the ancient world, the mysteries shift. They are no longer about the first attempts at meaning, but about power, ambition, and legacy. One of the most striking examples lies beneath a hill in central China, where for more than 2,000 years the earth has concealed the resting place of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. His tomb is said to hold wonders beyond imagination, but no one has entered it since it was sealed in 210 BCE. Imagine standing on the plains of Shanxi province, where the land rolls in soft hills and the air carries the dust of centuries. Farmers once worked these fields, planting wheat and millet, unaware that beneath their feet lay an entire hidden world. In 1974, when digging a well, villagers struck hardened clay that revealed fragments of life-sized warriors. It was the first glimpse of what we now call the Terracotta Army. Thousands of sculpted soldiers standing in rows, each with unique faces, guarding the emperor's tomb. Since then, excavation has revealed more than 8,000 figures, along with horses, chariots, and weapons, all arranged with meticulous order. But the Terracotta Army is only the outer guard. The true tomb lies deeper, beneath a mound said to be nearly 80 meters high. Ancient texts describe it as a palace beneath the earth, filled with treasures, rivers of mercury, and a ceiling inlaid with pearls to mimic the stars. For more than 2 millennia, it has remained sealed. Archaeologists today hesitate to open it, both for fear of damaging what lies within and because of the warnings written long ago. To understand why such a tomb was built, we must understand the man himself. Qin Shi Huang was born in 259 BCE as Ying Zheng, the king of the Qin state, B. By the age of 13, he had begun his reign, and by 39 he had conquered rival states to unify China for the first time. His achievements were vast. He standardized weights, measures, and coinage. He began construction of what would later become the Great Wall. He centralized power, reducing the influence of nobles, and imposed strict laws. His rule was harsh, but it created order out of centuries of warring kingdoms. Daily life in his empire was transformed by these reforms. Farmers now paid taxes in grain, measured by standardized units. Merchants used round bronze coins stamped with square holes. Roads connected distant provinces, patrolled by officials who enforced imperial laws. For ordinary people, the changes meant both stability and burden. The state demanded labor, taxes, and obedience. Rebellion was punished severely. Yet the unification also allowed trade, travel, and communication across a territory larger than most empires of the ancient world. The emperor's obsession with immortality is well documented. He sought elixirs, consulted alchemists, and sent expeditions in search of mythical islands said to hold the secret of eternal life. He feared death deeply, yet when it came, he had already ordered preparations for a tomb that would ensure his presence lasted forever. Construction is said to have begun as soon as he ascended the throne. Hundreds of thousands of workers labored for decades, quarrying stone, transporting earth, and shaping figures. Entire workshops produced the terracotta warriors, each formed in parts and then assembled, painted in bright colors that have long since faded. The tomb complex itself, according to the historian Sima Qian writing a century later, was designed as a miniature of the empire. Palaces, towers, and offices were reproduced underground. Rivers and seas were represented by flowing mercury. The ceiling was decorated with constellations, making the emperor's eternal resting place a mirror of the cosmos. Crossbows were set to fire automatically at intruders, traps designed to protect the emperor in death, as in life. Standing today in the museum that covers the main pits of the Terracotta Army, you can see row upon row of silent soldiers. Each face is distinct, some stern, some youthful, some weary. Their hairstyles and armor vary, reflecting ranks and divisions. Horses stand ready to pull wooden chariots. Bronze weapons, once sharp and functional, lie beside them. The effect is overwhelming, a reminder of the scale of Qin Shi Huang's ambition. And yet, the emperor himself lies untouched, deeper within the mound, hidden from sight. Why has the tomb not been opened? The reasons are both practical and symbolic. Archaeologists worry that opening the chamber would expose delicate artifacts to sudden decay. The painted surfaces of the warriors, for example, flaked away within minutes of being unearthed, destroyed by exposure to air and moisture. Until technology exists to preserve what lies inside, many believe the tomb should remain sealed. There are also the warnings. Ancient texts mention mercury flowing in the tomb, and modern soil tests around the mound show unusually high levels of mercury, suggesting the accounts may be true. Entering the tomb could be hazardous to health. Legends of curses, though less scientific, also contribute to the reluctance. The emperor, who ruled with absolute authority, still commands caution from the grave. For historians, the tomb remains one of the greatest untapped sources of knowledge about ancient China. What treasures, texts, and artifacts might lie inside? Could there be records of daily life, accounts of his reign, objects never seen before? The possibilities stir the imagination, and yet for now, the answers remain locked away. Ordinary people in Qin Shi Huang's time would never have seen the tomb. It was built in secrecy, guarded by soldiers, and many of those who labored on it may have been buried alive within its walls to ensure silence. While the emperor sought immortality, the workers faced only death. Their families carried on in villages, farming the land, paying taxes, and enduring the weight of imperial rule. In the contrast between emperor and commoner lies the human reality of the tomb. One man's vision of eternity, built upon the lives of countless others whose names are lost. And so the great mound remains. Grass grows over it, trees root on its slopes, and the seasons pass. Beneath lies a world no living person has seen for over 2,000 years. Someday, perhaps, technology will allow us to enter without destroying what is preserved. Until then, we wait. The mystery of Qin Shi Huang's tomb is not simply what lies inside. It is also why we hesitate. Are we protecting history? Or are we still obeying the emperor's command to keep his secrets? Is the silence of the mound a barrier we respect, or one we fear? Tonight, as we leave the hill behind, we carry with us the unresolved weight of that question. The emperor lies in darkness, his warriors standing eternal guard, his rivers of mercury still flowing perhaps. What stories wait inside his underground palace? We cannot know. All we can do is imagine and wonder how much of ancient history remains locked beneath the earth, just out of reach. The unopened tomb of China's first emperor leaves us standing before silence, a great mound holding secrets we cannot reach. Now we travel westward, to the deserts of Egypt, where another monument lies not buried but abandoned, half emerged from the earth. It is the unfinished obelisk of Aswan, the largest stone ever attempted in ancient Egypt, a project that was started but never completed. To walk among the quarries of Aswan is to glimpse the raw labor behind Egypt's most enduring monuments, and to confront a mystery not of disappearance, but of interruption. Why such a colossal work was begun, and why it was left unfinished. The city of Aswan lies along the Nile, where the river narrows into cataracts, forcing boats to navigate rocky channels and rapids. For the ancient Egyptians, this was the southern frontier of their land, a place where desert met river, and where the granite bedrock of the region supplied the raw material for temples, tombs, and statues. Unlike the limestone of the Nile Valley, Aswan granite was dense, hard, and enduring. It gleamed in the sun, flecked with crystals of feldspar and quartz. To quarry it was backbreaking work, yet it was prized for obelisks, those tall, tapering monuments that stood before temples as symbols of the sun's rays. The unfinished obelisk lies in one of these quarries, still attached to the bedrock. If it had been completed, it would have stood about 42 meters high and weighed nearly 1,200 tons. No other single stone monument in Egypt approaches that size. The obelisk was begun by cutting trenches along its sides, leaving its base attached to the rock. Workers used dolerite pounding stones, harder than granite, to chip away at the surface. Hundreds of these hammerstones had been found scattered in the quarry. The process was slow and grueling. Each blow left shallow dimples in the stone, day after day. Under the heat of the sun, men and women struck at the rock, shaping its sides, smoothing its surfaces, slowly revealing its monumental form. Imagine standing there as a worker in the New Kingdom period, perhaps during the reign of Hatshepsut in the 15th century BCE. The sun beats down, the air shimmers with heat, and the dust of granite fills your lungs. You grip a dolerite hammerstone, heavy and rough, and swing it again and again against the rock. Chips fly, your arms ache, your skin burns, but the shape grows. Around you, dozens of others do the same, a chorus of blows ringing across the quarry. Supervisors watch, recording progress. Water is hauled in jars to slake thirst. Food is brought, bread, onions, dried fish, eaten quickly before work resumes. For weeks, months, perhaps years, the task continues. And then, a crack appears. Deep within the stone, a flaw reveals itself. The obelisk, enormous and nearly complete, cannot be freed without breaking. All the labor is suddenly useless. The project is abandoned. The workers move on, leaving behind the largest single piece of stone ever quarried in Egypt. There it lies still, half-shaped, a monument to ambition cut short. Why did the crack appear? Perhaps the stone itself held hidden weaknesses. Granite, though strong, can fracture under stress. Perhaps mistakes were made in cutting, pressure distributed unevenly, or too much haste applied. Whatever the cause, the obelisk was left in place, never raised, never inscribed with hieroglyphs, never set before a temple to catch the first rays of morning sun. The obelisks that were completed elsewhere give us a sense of what this one might have meant. They were carved with the names of pharaohs, glorifying their reigns. They were associated with the sun god Ra, symbols of divine power. Their sharp tips, once covered with electrum or gold, gleamed at sunrise, linking heaven and earth. To see one standing tall was to see the authority of Egypt made visible in stone. The unfinished obelisk would have been the largest of them all, a statement of supreme ambition. Its abandonment is therefore striking. For archaeologists, the obelisk offers rare insight into the techniques of quarrying. The trenches carved around it show exactly how workers separated stone from bedrock. Dolerite hammerstones lie where they were dropped. The surfaces show tool marks in patterns, evidence of systematic labor. No other site reveals the process so clearly. In this sense, the failure has become our advantage. The unfinished work is a frozen moment in time, showing us what normally would have been erased once a monument was completed and moved. And here another mystery arises. How would they have moved it? Even the largest obelisks that were successfully raised, such as the ones standing today in Karnak or in Rome, weigh far less than this one. The logistics of transporting a 1,200-ton block of granite from Aswan to Thebes, more than 100 kilometers downstream, seem staggering. Barges would have been required, ropes thicker than a man's arm, hundreds if not thousands of laborers hauling and guiding. Was it even possible? Did the ancient engineers overreach, beginning a project that no amount of manpower could ever have completed? Or did they truly have a method, lost to us, that would have made it possible? Daily life continued around this colossal task. Families in Aswan farmed along the Nile, growing barley and emmer wheat, raisin, goats and cattle. Children played near the riverbanks, women wove linen from flax, fishermen cast nets for perch and catfish. Traders arrived with goods from Nubia, gold, ivory, incense, passing through the frontier town on their way north. Temples resounded with hymns, priests performed rituals, scribes recorded offerings. In the midst of this ordinary rhythm, the quarry echoed with blows against granite, the labor of hundreds striving toward an impossible monument. The unfinished obelisk reminds us that ancient Egypt, so often associated with perfection and permanence, also knew failure. For every pyramid completed, there were plans abandoned. For every obelisk that rose, there were others that cracked. The grandeur we see today was built upon countless attempts, countless lives spent in toil. Yet the Egyptians did not erase their failures. This obelisk remains, a silent witness to the limits of human ambition. And so, we are left with questions. Was the obelisk truly abandoned because of a flaw, or were there other reasons? Did political changes intervene, resources redirected, or priorities shifted? Could it have been left deliberately as an offering to the gods, a monument in its unfinished state? We cannot be certain. All we know is that the workers stopped, their tools left scattered, their task incomplete. To walk among the quarries today is to hear echoes. The sun still beats down, the rock still gleams, and the great obelisk lies in its trench. Tourists walk its length, dwarfed by its size, marveling at what might have been. Archaeologists measure, record, and study, but the central question remains unresolved. The unfinished obelisk stands, paradoxically, as one of Egypt's most powerful monuments, not because it was completed, but because it was not. It speaks of human ambition, of the desire to reach beyond limits, and of the silence that follows when those limits are met. It is a reminder that even the greatest civilizations left works undone, their dreams half-formed in stone. And so, as we leave Aswan behind, we carry with us the mystery of intention halted, of labor that could not reach its end. What did the workers feel as they dropped their tools for the last time? Relief, sorrow, or indifference? We will never know. The stone remains, unfinished, and its silence speaks louder than completion ever could. The unfinished obelisk of Aswan shows us ambition halted, a monument that never left the quarry. But some stones did leave their quarries, and when we see them today, standing in places far from where they were cut, we are left to wonder how they were ever moved at all. Now we travel north, across deserts and seas, to the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon. Here, in the ancient city of Baalbek, stand some of the largest stone blocks ever used in construction. They are so massive that even modern cranes would struggle with them. Their presence raises one of the oldest questions of architecture. How did people without machines manage to quarry, move, and set stones of such unimaginable size? Baalbek lies in a fertile valley between the Lebanon and anti-Lebanon mountain ranges. The land is rich, watered by rivers and springs, supporting fields of grain and groves of fruit. For thousands of years it has been a crossroads, where caravans carried goods between the Mediterranean coast and the interior of Syria. Its name comes from Baal, the storm god of the ancient Levant, and the site was sacred long before Rome built its temples there. The ruins visible today are largely Roman, vast temples dedicated to Jupiter, Bacchus, and Venus, built in the first centuries of the Common Era. Their columns rise high, their stairways climb toward the sky, their carvings proclaim the empire's reach. But beneath the Roman grandeur lies an older puzzle. The foundation platform of the Temple of Jupiter includes some of the largest stone blocks ever cut by human hands. They are known as the megaliths of Baalbek. One block, called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, lies in a nearby quarry. It measures about 20 meters long, over 4 meters wide, and more than 4 meters high. It weighs an estimated 1,000 tons. Another block, discovered beneath it in recent years, is even larger, approaching 1 pounds and 600 tons. Within the temple platform itself, 3 stones known as the trilithon each weigh around 800 tons, set side by side in a row about 7 meters above ground level. To stand before these stones is to feel small. Their size overwhelms the senses, their edges cut straight, their surfaces fitted precisely. How did ancient builders move them? The Romans were skilled engineers, capable of building aqueducts, amphitheaters, and roads across continents. They knew how to move heavy blocks with rollers, sledges, ropes, and ramps. Yet the sheer mass of the Baalbek megaliths stretches the limits of even Roman technique. The largest known Roman lifting devices could handle perhaps 100 tons. These blocks are many times that. Some scholars suggest that the stones were never meant to be moved, that they were left in the quarry because their size was impractical. But the trilithon stones, already in place within the platform, prove that enormous blocks were indeed transported and set. How was it done? One possibility is that the blocks were moved on sledges over packed earth, lubricated with water or oil, dragged by hundreds of workers or oxen. Ramps of earth and stone may have been built to raise them into position. Another idea is that they were rolled on wooden beams, though the weight would have crushed most timbers. Some engineers suggest the stones were not moved whole, but shaped in place. Yet the evidence points to deliberate transport, because the quarry lies some distance from the site. Imagine the scene. The quarry rings with the blows of iron tools, dust rising in the sun as workers cut channels around a massive block. Ropes creak, men shout, drums beat time. The block shifts, slowly inching onto a sledge. Hundreds of laborers strain, their feet sinking into soil, sweat pouring down their bodies. The block moves a few meters in a day. Camps spring up along the route, fires burning at night, food brought in baskets, bread, olives, dried meat, wine. Supervisors measure progress. Scribes record labor. Priests perhaps offer prayers. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, until the block reaches the temple site. Then ramps of earth are raised, higher and higher, until the stone can be slid into place, gravity helping it settle into the foundation. Whether this is how it was done, we cannot know for certain. What we do know is that the result was achieved. The trilithon stones stand, silent proof that the task was possible. Yet the exact method remains elusive, a lost chapter of engineering knowledge. Daily life around Baalbek carried on amid these monumental works. Farmers tended fields in the valley, growing wheat and barley, tending flocks of sheep and goats. Traders passed through, bringing spices, glassware, metals, and textiles. Children played in courtyards, women spun wool and wove cloth, men repaired tools and carts. The city itself was alive with markets, workshops, and religious festivals. In the shadow of the temples, people bought bread, bartered for goods, and offered sacrifices. The stones were part of this world, rising slowly as generations passed, symbols of power, but also backdrops to ordinary lives. What was the purpose of using stones so large? Some argue it was symbolic, a demonstration of power and permanence. Larger stones meant greater prestige, proof that the rulers could command vast resources and labor. Others suggest pure, practical reasons. Fewer joints between blocks meant stronger foundations. But perhaps the size itself was the point. To lift the eyes of worshippers, to overwhelm them with scale, to remind them of the god's greatness and the empire's might. And yet, the mystery remains unresolved. Were the Romans alone responsible for the megaliths, or did they build upon foundations laid by earlier cultures? Some believe the stones may predate Rome, cut and placed by unknown builders in earlier centuries. The absence of clear records leaves the question open. Legends have grown around the stones, attributing them to giants, demigods, or supernatural powers. For locals, the stone of the pregnant woman was said to grant fertility to those who touched it. In later centuries, the ruins were linked to King Solomon, Alexander the Great, and other figures of myth and history. Standing before the megaliths today, you feel both awe and puzzlement. They are solid, immovable, eternal, yet they also carry silence. They do not explain themselves. They leave us to imagine the hands that shaped them, the voices that shouted commands, the lives spent in toil. The stones remain, but the story is fractured. And so, as we leave Baalbek behind, we carry the unresolved weight of the question. How much did ancient builders truly know, and how much have we forgotten? Were these stones simply the product of immense labor and determination, Or do they hint at knowledge of engineering lost to time? The answer lies buried in the stones themselves, but they do not speak. The megaliths of Baalbek remind us of ambition expressed in stone, foundations so immense that they puzzle us still. Yet sometimes the mystery is not only in size, but in complexity. Our final step in the ancient world takes us back to Egypt, where Greek travelers once described a vast labyrinth at Hawara, a structure said to surpass even the pyramids in wonder. Today, little remains but ruins and sand, yet the descriptions left behind suggest a building so intricate and expansive that it has been called one of the greatest enigmas of antiquity. Hawara lies in the Fayum oasis, southwest of Cairo, where the Nile once fed a great lake called Lake Moeris. In the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, around the 12th dynasty, this region was transformed by canals and irrigation. Crops flourished, villages grew, and kings sought to demonstrate their power. One of these kings, Amenemhat III, ruled in the 19th century BCE, and it was he who built both a pyramid and, according to ancient accounts, the labyrinth that would stand beside it. Herodotus, the Greek historian of the 5th century BCE, described the labyrinth in detail. He claimed it had 12 courts, covered halls, and 3,000 rooms, half above ground and half below. He wrote that he found it greater than the pyramids, so vast and intricate that words could scarcely do it justice. Later writers, including Strabo and Diodorus, echoed these descriptions, speaking of endless corridors, winding passageways, and chambers filled with carvings. Some said the lower rooms held tombs of kings and sacred crocodiles. If we imagine walking through such a labyrinth, the experience would be disorienting. Corridors would stretch into darkness, columns rising on either side. Light would filter through narrow openings, casting shifting patterns on walls. Doors would open into chambers, each different, each filled with carvings of gods, ands, idols, and offerings. Turning one corner would lead to another passage, another hall, another choice. The sheer scale would overwhelm, designed perhaps to confuse or impress, to mirror the complexity of the cosmos itself. Why was it built? Some scholars believe it served as an administrative center for the Fayum, housing offices, records, and courts. In this view, the labyrinth was not only symbolic but practical, a central hub of governance. Others think it was a grand temple complex, dedicated to the gods and to the cult of Amenemhat III. The subterranean chambers, if they existed, may have been tombs or storerooms sealed away from the world above. Whatever its purpose, the ancient writers agreed on its scale and its impact. Daily life around Hawara must have been shaped by the labyrinth's presence. Farmers in the Fayum tilled their fields of wheat and barley, their irrigation ditches carrying water from the Nile. Fishermen cast nets into the lake, catching tilapia and catfish. Families lived in mud brick houses, cooking bread on open hearths, weaving flax into linen, raising goats and cattle. Children chased each other in the dust, while traders passed along canals with baskets of dates and jars of oil. In the midst of this ordinary life, the labyrinth rose, a colossal building, its walls gleaming in the sun, its halls echoing with footsteps. To the people, it must have seemed the work of gods as much as men. What remains today is far less. Archaeological excavations have revealed only traces, foundations, fragments of columns, pieces of reliefs. Time, flooding, and quarrying stripped the site of its grandeur. The stone was taken for later buildings, the chambers collapsed, the labyrinth itself reduced to silence. The pyramid of Amenemhat III still stands nearby, though weathered and eroded, its once smooth casing long gone. The grandeur described by Herodotus and others has vanished into dust, yet the mystery endures. Were the ancient accounts exaggerated, tales told to impress Greek audiences, or did the labyrinth truly exist as described, a building greater than any pyramid? Some modern scholars lean toward caution, suggesting the labyrinth was large but not as vast as legend claims. Others point to the consistency of multiple sources, arguing that such detail could not have been pure invention. The truth may lie somewhere between, a great building, extraordinary in scale, but magnified in memory through the lens of wonder. To think of the labyrinth is to think also of the human fascination with complexity. Across cultures, mazes and winding paths appear as symbols of journeys, of mysteries, of life itself. The Hawara labyrinth may have served such a role, a place where space embodied power, where architecture became a metaphor for order and confusion. Walking its halls, one might feel lost, yet also guided, compelled to move forward, to search for meaning. The legacy of the labyrinth today is subtle but significant. It inspired legends that carried into later times, influencing the very word labyrinth in Western imagination. When we speak of mazes in myth, from Crete's Minotaur to modern puzzles, we echo the memory of Hawara. Though little remains in stone, the idea has endured, more powerful than walls or columns. As the sun sets over the Fayum, the fields glow gold, the waters of the lake shimmer, and the ruins of Hawara lie quiet. Farmers still tend their crops, children still play. Life continues much as it always has. But beneath the soil lie fragments of a building that once dazzled all who saw it. The labyrinth is gone, yet its mystery survives. In words, in memory, and in the enduring sense that the ancients knew how to shape not only stone, but also human perception. And so we close our journey through the ancient world, from the unopened tomb of Qin Shi Huang, to the unfinished obelisk of Aswan, to the megaliths of Baalbek, and finally to the labyrinth of Hawara. We have seen ambition, failure, wonder, and loss. The ancients built monuments to outlast themselves, and in many ways they succeeded. Yet even when the stones remain, their meanings slip away. We are left with fragments, ruins, and questions. The ancient world whispers to us still, but it does not answer. Its mysteries remind us that even the greatest achievements are subject to time, and that what we inherit is never the whole story. Perhaps that is the greatest legacy of these wonders, not their grandeur, but their silence, urging us to look closer, to imagine, and to remember that history is always more than we can see. The labyrinth of Hawara reminds us how much of the ancient world can be lost, leaving only fragments and memory. As we move forward into the classical and medieval eras, the mysteries take on new forms, not vast monuments but small, curious objects that defy explanation. Few examples are as intriguing as the Roman dodecahedrons, strange bronze artifacts found scattered across Europe, each shaped with geometric precision, each enigmatic in its purpose. Imagine walking through a Roman field in what is now France or Germany, the soil freshly turned by plough or shovel. Among shards of pottery and stones, a glint of metal appears. You pull it from the dirt and hold it in your hand. It is a small bronze object, roughly the size of a fist, with 12 flat faces. Each face is a pentagon with a circular hole in the center, the holes varying in size. At the corners sit small knobs or spheres. The object is surprisingly light, yet carefully cast. It seems deliberate, meaningful. But what is it? Archaeologists have found more than 100 of these objects, dating from the 2nd to 4th centuries CE. They appear in Roman provinces north of the Alps, from Britain to Hungary. None have been discovered in Italy itself, suggesting they were regional rather than empire-wide. Their sizes vary, but most measure between 4 and 11 centimeters across. They are hollow, their surfaces sometimes decorated with patterns or inscriptions, though rarely. They are always made of bronze, a material valuable enough that their survival is notable. Why were they not melted down in later times? The mystery lies in their function. No ancient text mentions them. No inscription explains them. They appear in graves, in hoards, in fields, but without context. Scholars have proposed countless theories. Some think they were candlesticks with wax or oil lamps placed inside. Others suggest they were ice, though their irregular holes make this unlikely. Some propose they were tools for measuring, perhaps used by surveyors to calculate angles or distances. Others argue they were gauges for knitting gloves, the different holes allowing consistent sizes for fingers. More speculative ideas include astronomical instruments, religious objects, or even children's toys. To imagine them in use, we must place ourselves in a Roman provincial setting. Life on the frontier of the empire was not the marble splendor of Rome itself, but a blend of Roman order and local traditions. A Roman soldier might patrol a road lined with wooden watchtowers. Farmers tended wheat, barley, and vines, their houses of timber and clay clustered in villages. Markets bustled with goods, pottery, cloth, tools, salted fish, amphorae of wine. Latin mixed with local languages, the empire's reach felt in taxes and laws, but adapted in daily rhythms. Into this world, the dodecahedron appears, an object of craftsmanship, not mass-produced, but carefully cast in bronze. If it were a simple toy, why such expense? If it were a tool, why no record? If it were ritual, why so widely distributed? Each possibility raises more questions. Consider the theory of knitting. In some regions, traces of wear suggest cords or threads may have passed through the holes. Perhaps the dodecahedron was used to weave or measure textiles, ensuring standard sizes. In an era when clothing was handmade, such precision would be useful. Yet no direct evidence links them to weaving or knitting, and no depiction survives to confirm this. The astronomical theory imagines them as devices for measuring the position of the sun or stars. By sighting through the holes, one might calculate angles, track solstices, or align calendars. The Romans valued astronomy for both agriculture and ritual, and such instruments would be plausible, yet agi. No text describes such a use, and the practicality is uncertain. The candlestick theory is simpler. Place a small candle or oil lamp inside, and the light would shine through the holes, casting patterns on walls. The knobs might stabilize it on a surface. Decorative, yes, but would so many be made and scattered across provinces only for decoration? Each explanation falters, and the dodecahedron returns to silence. Daily life continued around them regardless. Roman farmers plowed their fields, Roman soldiers marched in formation, Roman children played with clay dolls or wooden hoops. Merchants loaded carts with grain, smiths hammered iron into nails and tools, bakers pulled loaves from ovens. The empire stretched across continents, but in every corner, people lived ordinary lives, their concerns practical and immediate. The dodecahedron, whatever it was, fit into this world somehow. Held in hands, used for something, passed from one person to another. To them it was ordinary, meaningful. To us, it is opaque. There is something humbling about this. We know so much about Rome, its emperors, its battles, its roads and aqueducts. We have texts, inscriptions, coins, ruins. Yet here is an object, common enough to appear across provinces, about which we know nothing. Its meaning has vanished entirely. And so we are left with questions. Was it ritual, a small token of belief carried by soldiers or farmers? Was it practical, a tool for measuring or crafting? Was it playful, a toy or puzzle? Or was it symbolic, a reminder of geometry, of order, of the cosmos shaped into bronze? The dodecahedrons sit today in museums, displayed behind glass, their bronze surfaces green with age. Visitors peer at them, tilt their heads, read the labels that confess ignorance. Purpose unknown. Children press their faces to the glass, perhaps imagining them as magical dice or alien artifacts. Scholars debate in journals, testing theories, but certainty who days them? Perhaps that is their legacy, to remind us how easily meaning slips away. An object that once had a clear purpose is now nothing but mystery. In that sense, the dodecahedron is not only an artifact of Rome, but a mirror of our own fragility. How much of what we create today will be incomprehensible millennia from now? As we leave the Roman provinces behind, we carry with us the unresolved puzzle of the dodecahedrons. Small, silent, and unknowable, they remind us that history is full of gaps, and that even in an empire as vast as Rome, some things slip beyond memory. The Roman dodecahedrons leave us with the strange silence of an object stripped of meaning. We now move into the Middle Ages, where another artifact survives, but this time not in bronze or stone, but in parchment and ink. It is the largest surviving medieval manuscript in the world, a book so immense and so mysterious that it is known as the Codex Gigas, or the Devil's Bible. Unlike the dodecahedrons, we know who created books in monasteries, how scribes worked, what ink was made from, and how parchment was prepared. Yet the Codex Gigas remains an enigma because of its sheer scale, its peculiar contents, and the legend that surrounds it. Imagine standing in a dimly lit monastery in the early 13th century, in what is now the Czech Republic. The air smells of candle wax and ink. The walls echo with the faint chant of monks at prayer. In a scriptorium, a long table holds sheets of parchment, quills, and pots of ink. A single monk bends over his work, carefully tracing letters in neat columns. His hand is steady, his progress slow. Copying books is the work of months, even years, for each volume. Most manuscripts are small, fitting in a monk's lap or placed easily on a desk. But the Codex Gigas is not like other manuscripts. The Codex measures nearly 1 meter tall and half a meter wide. It weighs over 70 kilograms, too heavy for one person to carry alone. Its pages, made from the skins of more than 160 animals, are thick and smooth, turned with effort. Inside, it contains not just one text but many: the entire Latin Bible, medical treatises, histories, calendars, and incantations. It is a library bound into a single volume. What makes it most famous, however, is the legend attached to it. According to a story told centuries later, the manuscript was created by a monk who broke his vows and was sentenced to be walled up alive. In desperation, he promised to create a bootah that would glorify his monastery and contain all human knowledge, and to do it in a single night. Realizing the task was impossible, he turned to the devil for help, offering his soul in exchange. By dawn, the book was complete, and in gratitude, the monk included a full-page portrait of the devil himself. That portrait still exists. Turn to one of the middle pages of the Codex, and there it is. A horned figure with clawed feet and a red tongue, crouched within a frame, staring out with wide eyes. Facing it on the opposite page is a depiction of the heavenly city. The juxtaposition has fueled centuries of speculation. Why is the devil given such a place of prominence? Was it meant as a warning, a reminder of sin, or a record of the pact described in legend? The truth is more prosaic, but no less impressive. Paleographic studies suggest the manuscript was written by a single scribe, perhaps over 2 decades. The handwriting is consistent throughout, neat and steady. The ink is made from crushed insects and gall nuts, the parchment carefully prepared. Creating such a book would have required not only skill, but also immense resources. The hides of 160 animals had to be processed, smoothed, and cut. The quills had to be trimmed, the ink mixed, the margins ruled. Page after page was filled with precise letters, headings, and decorations. Daily life in the monastery where it was made would have been structured and repetitive. Monks rose before dawn, chanting prayers, eating simple meals of bread, vegetables, and occasionally fish. They worked in silence, copying texts, tending gardens, caring for the sick, or brewing beer. Each day was punctuated by bells calling them to prayer, 7 times in all. For the scribe of the Codex, much of life would have been spent bent over parchment, eyes straining, back aching, fingers ink-stained. Outside, peasants tilled fields, paid rents to lords, and brought tithes to the church. Seasons shaped everything: planting in spring, harvesting in autumn, preparing for the scarcity of winter. And yet, The Codex Gigas transcended ordinary life. It was an object of ambition, perhaps meant to impress rulers or patrons. Some believe it was commissioned to glorify the monastery of Podlajica, though that monastery was small and poor, making such a costly manuscript puzzling. Later, the Codex passed into the hands of Emperor Rudolf II in Prague. Known for his fascination with alchemy and the occult, it eventually found its way to Sweden, taken as war booty in the 17th century, and today it resides in the National Library in Stockholm. The manuscript's contents add to its mystery. Alongside the Bible are medical texts by Hippocrates and Theophilus, a chronicle of Bohemia, a calendar, and even incantations against evil spirits. The mixture seems eclectic, as if the book were intended to gather all useful knowledge into one place. Why combine Holy Scripture with practical medicine and magical formulas? Was it a library for a community far from other sources of knowledge, or a personal compendium for a ruler? The intent remains unclear. Then there is the question of the devil's portrait. Few medieval manuscripts give Satan such a prominent place. Was it simply an illustration, a reminder of evil's presence? Or was it meant as a warning to those who read the incantations and charms nearby? Some suggest it was a visual counterpart to the heavenly city opposite, contrasting salvation and damnation. Others cannot resist the allure of the legend, seeing in it proof of the monk's desperate bargain. To stand before the Codex today is to feel its weight not only physically but also historically. The pages are enormous, their margins wide, their letters steady. The devil stares out, centuries old, his gaze unchanged. Visitors whisper, their voices hushed in the library's light, as though the manuscript itself demands reverence. Yet the mystery endures. Why create such a massive book? Why invest so much effort into binding an entire library into one volume? Was it an act of devotion, an attempt at immortality, or simply a demonstration of power? And why, in all the careful copying, was a portrait of the devil included, stark and unforgettable? The Codex Gigas remains intact, but its meaning eludes us. Like the Roman dodecahedrons, it confronts us with silence. We know the how, parchment, ink, labor, but we do not know the why. And so it remains one of the most enigmatic books of the medieval world, a monument in ink as mysterious as any monument in stone. The Codex Gigas shows us how a book can be immense and awe-inspiring, a library bound into one volume, its meaning colored by legend and fear. Yet some manuscripts are mysterious for different reasons. They are not vast or monumental, but obscure and impenetrable, written in scripts that no one can read. Among these is the Rohoncs Codex, a manuscript discovered in Hungary in the early 19th century, written in an unknown language, illustrated with strange drawings, and never convincingly deciphered. Where the Codex Gigas astonishes by its scale, the Rohoncs Codex unsettles by its silence, a book that speaks in symbols we cannot understand. The Codex surfaced in 1838, when it was donated to the Hungarian Academy of Sciences by a nobleman named Gustav Batthyány. Its earlier history is uncertain. Some believe it may have come from the Batthyány family library, perhaps passed down from generations before. The book itself is small, about 12 by 10 centimeters, with 448 pages written in a script unlike any known language. The letters number more than 200 unique symbols, arranged in short lines, running from right to left. No one has been able to link them to Latin, Greek, Cyrillic, Arabic, or any established script. Open the book, and the first impression is of density. Page after page is filled with small, careful characters, written with consistency, but without breaks into words we can recognize. Amid the text are illustrations, scenes of people in robes, soldiers with swords, priests before altars, crosses and suns, buildings and rivers. The images suggest a Christian context. Crucifixion scenes, perhaps baptism, processions of figures, but the script gives no explanation. Scholars who first examined the book were baffled. Some thought it might be a hoax created in the 18th or 19th century to deceive collectors. Others argued it must be authentic, perhaps a medieval text in a lost language. Cryptographers tried to find patterns, to assign values to symbols, to see whether the script encoded Hungarian, Romanian, or another European tongue. None succeeded. The text remains resistant to interpretation. To imagine its creation, let us place ourselves in a medieval scriptorium, perhaps in a frontier region of Europe. A scribe bends over parchment, quill in hand, dipping it into ink. He writes carefully, page after page, line after line, symbols flowing in an order only he understands. Outside the monastery walls, peasants work fields of rye and barley, tend sheep and goats, cut wood for winter. The seasons turn, harvest follows planting, snow follows harvest. Life is ordinary, repetitive, stable in its rhythms. Yet within, the scribe is producing something extraordinary, a text that centuries later, no one will be able to read. Why would such a book be written? If it is genuine, it may represent a local script developed for a small community, later forgotten. It may be a cipher, a code meant to conceal sacred or secret knowledge. The illustrations suggest Christian themes, but the text could be scripture, commentary, prayers, or even a chronicle. Without decipherment, we cannot know. Attempts to solve the mystery have been many. Some scholars claim to find patterns resembling prayers, with repeated phrases like "Our Lord" or "Our God." Others suggested it may encode Old Hungarian using an invented alphabet. Some saw parallels with Brahmi or other Asian scripts, imagining connections through trade or migration. In recent decades, computer analysis has been applied, seeking statistical patterns. The text appears consistent, not random, suggesting it is meaningful rather than gibberish. Yet every proposed decipherment has been disputed, none accepted as definitive. The possibility of a hoax lingers. Could someone in the 18th century have filled a book with invented symbols, adding Christian illustrations to make it appear authentic? If so, it would have required immense effort, hundreds of pages of consistent handwriting with enough internal structure to fool even modern analysts. The motive is unclear. Such a hoax would have had little market value, and the work involved would be disproportionate. Still, some scholars argue this is the simplest explanation. Daily life in Hungary at the time of the book's donation was marked by change. The 19th century saw revolutions, reforms, and rising nationalism. The discovery of a mysterious manuscript seemed to promise a link to a deeper past, perhaps even evidence of an ancient Hungarian script. The hope of connecting the codex to national identity fueled interest, though disappointment followed as decipherment failed. Today, the Rohonc Codex rests in the Hungarian Academy of Sciences in Budapest, studied but unsolved. Scholars from many countries have examined it, proposed theories, and published analyses. Cryptographers, linguists, and historians return to it again and again, drawn by the allure of a text that resists understanding. Visitors who see it behind glass often linger, staring at the neat lines of script, the tiny drawings, the sheer strangeness of it. It seems to whisper of another world, another culture, perhaps another way of thinking, now lost. The mystery lies not only in what the Codex says, but in why it exists at all. Was it truly a sacred book, a scripture for a small community whose language vanished? Was it an elaborate riddle meant to test or confound? Was it a personal creation, a work of imagination, never meant to be read by others? Each possibility is both tantalizing and unsatisfying, because the text remains closed. As we reflect on the Rohonc Codex, we feel the same humility that the Roman dodecahedrons inspire. Human beings once poured time, effort, and care into creating this object. For them, it held meaning, purpose, and perhaps holiness. For us, it is opaque. The gulf of time has erased the key, leaving only symbols without voice. And so we are left unresolved. The Rohonc Codex remains what it has always been, a book no one can read, a puzzle without solution, a reminder that history is not a straight line of clarity, but a landscape of forgotten paths. It sits in silence, waiting, daring us to understand. The Rohant's Codex reminds us how a single book can hold meaning we cannot reach, a text forever silent. But now we turn to a mystery not of one book, but of thousands. Perhaps hundreds of thousands, a vast collection that once existed and is now lost. Few names in history carry as much weight in the imagination as the Library of Alexandria. It is said to have been the greatest repository of knowledge in the ancient world, gathering scrolls from across lands and seas. Yet today, nothing of it remains. Its disappearance is one of history's great tragedies, a loss we feel not only for what it was, but for what it might have been. Alexandria was founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE on the coast of Egypt, where the Nile meets the Mediterranean. Its harbour grew into one of the busiest in the ancient world. Its lighthouse, the Pharos, counted among the seven wonders. Here, under the rule of the Ptolemaic dynasty, the library was established, perhaps in the 3rd century BCE. The Ptolemies sought to make Alexandria not only a political capital, but also an intellectual one. They gathered scholars, poets, mathematicians, and physicians, inviting them to study, write, and teach. The library itself was part of the Mosion, a temple to the Muses. Ancient accounts describe it as containing scrolls of every subject: philosophy, medicine, astronomy, history, drama, and poetry. Ships docking at Alexandria were said to have their manuscripts confiscated, copied, and added to the collection. Some estimates suggest the library may have held hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Whether this is exaggeration or truth, the vision is clear: a universal library aiming to gather all knowledge under one roof. Imagine walking its halls in the 2nd century BCE. The air is heavy with the scent of papyrus and ink. Wooden shelves line the walls, scrolls stacked in bundles, each tied with a tag naming its contents. Scholars in white robes sit at tables, unrolling texts, debating in low voices. A mathematician traces diagrams in wax tablets. A physician copies recipes for remedies made of herbs and minerals. A poet composes verses, drawing inspiration from Homer. Outside, Alexandria bustles with merchants, sailors, and citizens. But inside, the library hums with the quiet labor of thought. Daily life around Alexandria added to this sense of wonder. Fishermen cast nets in the harbor, their boats rocking in the tide. Farmers brought grain from the Nile Delta, feeding a growing population. Markets rang with the voices of traders, selling olive oil, wine, cloth, and spices. Temples resounded with prayers, while workshops produced glass, papyrus, and textiles. The library was part of this city, embedded in its rhythm, yet also apart, a place of learning and ambition. The mystery of the library lies in its end. No single story explains its loss. Some blame Julius Caesar, who in 48 BCE set fire to ships in Alexandria's harbour during a civil war, the flames spreading and destroying parts of the city, perhaps including the library. Others point to later centuries: the sack of Alexandria by Aurelian in the 3rd century CE, or the decrees of Theophilus and later Christian leaders in the 4th century, or the Muslim conquest in the 7th. Each story has been told, debated, and doubted. The truth may be that the library did not end in one blaze, but declined over centuries, its scrolls dispersed, damaged or neglected until nothing remained. What was lost? That is the deepest mystery. Some imagine plays of Sophocles and Euripides that no longer survive, poems from ancient poets whose names we do not know, histories of lands forgotten, medical treatises with remedies unknown to us. Perhaps there were texts from Mesopotamia or India, records of voyages, astronomical tables, maps of distant coasts. Perhaps works of science and philosophy we can only guess at. Or perhaps the collection was never as vast as legend suggests, and our grief is more for what we imagine than what truly was. The silence of the library forces us to consider the fragility of knowledge. Scrolls of papyrus were delicate, easily damaged by fire, water, or time. Without copying, they decayed within centuries. The effort of preserving them required constant labor, constant attention. Even a great library could vanish if neglected. In that sense, the Library of Alexandria is not only a mystery, but also a warning. And yet, its legacy endures. The very idea of a universal library, a place that gathers all knowledge, has inspired countless successors, from medieval scriptoria to modern institutions like the British Library or the Library of Congress. Even in its absence, Alexandria shaped our vision of what learning could be. Its loss haunts us precisely because it represents a dream we still chase. Standing in Alexandria today, the harbor busy with ships, the modern city sprawling where the ancient once stood, there are no ruins of the library to see. The site is uncertain, the stones repurposed, the halls long gone. Only words remain, the descriptions of ancient writers, the legends passed down. And in that gap between what was and what is, the imagination fills with longing. The Library of Alexandria is a paradox. It is remembered as the greatest collection of books, yet none of its books survive. It is lamented as the greatest loss, yet we cannot say exactly when or how it vanished. It is a symbol of knowledge, yet it teaches us above all about ignorance, how easily wisdom can be lost, how much of the past is gone. And so we close this journey through the classical and medieval mysteries. From the Roman dodecahedrons, to the Codex Gigas, to the Rohansk Codex, and finally the Library of Alexandria, we have seen how objects and books can puzzle us, how knowledge can survive yet remain unreadable, how entire collections can vanish into silence. The stones of temples endure, the ruins of cities remain, but knowledge itself is fragile, dependent on paper, parchment, memory, and care. The mysteries of this era remind us that what we know today is only a fraction of what once existed. They urge us to preserve what we have, to value knowledge not as permanent, but as precious, vulnerable, and fleeting. The Library of Alexandria is gone, but its shadow reminds us still of what could be, and of what we must protect if we wish the future to inherit more than fragments. The Library of Alexandria leaves us with the ache of loss, of knowledge vanished into silence. As we turn toward the modern age, mysteries take on a different shape. They are not always ruins buried beneath sand or scrolls written in forgotten tongues. Sometimes they are puzzles hidden beneath the earth, discoveries that ignite centuries of speculation, hope, and disappointment. Few examples have captured imagination so persistently as the Oak Island mystery in Nova Scotia, a story that began in the late 18th century and still continues today. Oak Island lies off the coast of Nova Scotia, a small wooded island about 140 acres in size, surrounded by cold Atlantic waters. In the summer of 1795, a young man named Daniel McGuinness walked through its forest and noticed a depression in the ground beneath a tree. Beside it, a block and tackle hung from a branch, as if someone had once lowered or raised something there. McGuinness, joined by friends John Smith and Anthony Vaughan, began to dig. A few feet down, they struck a layer of flagstones. Deeper still, every 10 feet, they encountered wooden platforms made of oak logs. Convinced they had found the entrance to a buried treasure, they kept digging. What they uncovered would become known as the money pit. At about 90 feet down, water began to flood the shaft, filling it faster than it could be bailed. The men were forced to abandon the dig. Over the years, many others would return, digging new shafts, building pumps, and inventing contraptions to reach the depths. Each time, flooding defeated them. The pit seemed to be connected to hidden tunnels leading to the sea, designed to flood any attempt at excavation. The question that has haunted Oak Island ever since is simple. What, if anything, lies buried there? Theories abound. Some say it is pirate treasure, perhaps belonging to Captain Kidd or Blackbeard, hidden and in a booby-trapped vault. Others suggest it might be the lost treasure of the Templars, the Ark of the Covenant, or documents from ancient civilizations carried across the Atlantic. Some think it may be nothing more than a collapsed sinkhole or a natural formation, misinterpreted by hopeful diggers. Yet the persistence of the wooden platforms, the flooding tunnels, and fragments of artifacts found over the centuries keep the mystery alive. Life in Nova Scotia at the time of the first discovery was harsh but steady. Settlers farmed small plots, raising potatoes, wheat, and livestock. Fishing in the cold Atlantic was a major livelihood, with cod, mackerel, and herring filling boats and barrels. Families lived in wooden houses, heated by fireplaces, their days shaped by the rhythm of tides and seasons. The discovery of a supposed treasure pit would have been a remarkable diversion, a story to tell in taverns and by hearths, blending the ordinary hardships of survival with the hope of sudden wealth. Over the 19th century, numerous companies formed to dig the pit. The Onslow Company in 1804, the Truro Company in 1849, the Oak Island Association in the 1860s. Each brought workers, equipment, and determination. They found coconut fiber, unusual in Nova Scotia, buried deep in the soil. They found markings on stones, though many later vanished or were disputed. They built pumps to drain the water, dug side shafts, and lowered men with ropes. Always the sea flooded back, the tunnels defeating them. Some men died in accidents, drowned or suffocated, and the pit gained a reputation as cursed. By the 20th century, Oak Island was famous. Newspapers reported on new attempts, magazines speculated, and investors continued to fund digs. Even Franklin Roosevelt, before becoming President of the United States, followed the story with interest and visited the island in his youth. The search expanded beyond the money pit, with boreholes drilled across the island, looking for hidden chambers or vaults. Fragments of metal, bits of parchment, and carved stones fueled belief that something lay below, though nothing conclusive ever emerged. Daily life for the treasure hunters was difficult. They lived in rough camps, ate simple meals of bread, salted meat and fish, and worked long hours with shovels, picks, and pumps. The Atlantic weather was harsh. Storms could flood their works overnight, and winter froze the ground. Investors often lost money, companies went bankrupt, and yet new groups always arrived, drawn by the lure of treasure. The pit itself seemed alive, resisting them, filling with water, collapsing shafts, swallowing tools. The 20th century brought modern technology: drills, bulldozers, sonar, cameras lowered into boreholes. Images showed shadows that some claimed were wooden chests, metal tools, or even human remains. But each discovery was contested, each result unclear. In the 21st century, television crews joined the search, documenting new digs and explorations. Oak Island became not only a mystery, but a spectacle, watched by millions worldwide. And yet, the central question remains unanswered. If something was buried there, who buried it? And why go to such elaborate lengths to protect it? Constructing flood tunnels from the sea, laying oak platforms every 10 feet, and disguising the site would have required immense labor and skill. For pirates, such effort seems unlikely. For a secret order like the Templars, perhaps more plausible. Though still without evidence. Or is it all a misinterpretation? The oak layers natural, the flooding the result of porous geology, the artifacts mere coincidences. To walk the island today is to feel this tension. Quiet woods stretch across the land, gulls wheel overhead, the sea pounds against the shore. The pit itself is fenced, surrounded by machinery and equipment. Visitors come on tours, hearing the stories of treasure and tragedy. Locals recall generations of searchers, each convinced they would be the ones to succeed. The island feels at once ordinary, just another patch of Nova Scotia coast, and extraordinary, charged with centuries of human longing. The Oak Island mystery endures not because of what is found, but because of what is not. It is a story of persistence, of hope renewed again and again. Each failure deepens the allure, Each fragment fuels belief. And so, more than 2 centuries after Daniel McGuinness first dug into the ground, the island still holds its secret. What lies beneath? Gold, relics, documents, or nothing at all? The question is unresolved, and perhaps it always will be. But the mystery has become larger than any treasure. It is a mirror of our desire to believe, to hope, to imagine that beneath ordinary soil lies something extraordinary. The island of Oak lies quiet beneath Atlantic winds, its treasure still uncertain. From buried secrets we now turn to a mystery that floated across the open sea. A ship found adrift, intact, but with no one aboard. This is the story of the Mary Celeste, the most famous ghost ship in history. On December the 4th, 1872, the British brigantine Dei Gratia was sailing through the Atlantic, about 400 miles east of the Azores. Its crew spotted another vessel drifting aimlessly. The ship was the Mary Celeste, out of New York, bound for Genoa with a cargo of industrial alcohol. She was seaworthy, her sails partly set, her cargo intact. But when the crew of the Dei Gratia boarded her, they found her deserted. The captain, Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and the crew of 7 were gone. They had vanished without a trace. The ship itself offered only fragments of clues. The cargo hold was mostly full, with only a few barrels of alcohol damaged or empty. The lifeboat was missing, suggesting it had been lowered. The ship's logbook recorded nothing unusual up to November 25th, 9 days earlier. The galley was in order, with food supplies ample. Personal belongings, including valuables, were left behind. The sails were worn and slightly damaged, but the vessel was not sinking. The mystery was immediate. Why would the crew abandon a seaworthy ship in mid-ocean? To imagine the voyage, we must place ourselves aboard in November 1872. The Mary Celeste was a sturdy brigantine, about 100 feet long, 2 masts carrying canvas sails, her decks of wood smelling of tar and salt. The hold was filled with 1,701 barrels of alcohol, stowed and secured. Captain Briggs was a seasoned sailor, respected for his discipline. His wife Sarah had chosen to join him, unusual for the time, bringing their young daughter. The crew were mostly Germans, competent and steady. Each day, watches were kept, sails trimmed, meals prepared in the galley, hard bread, salted meat, coffee when available. Nights were long, filled with the sound of waves against hull and rigging creaking above. Life at sea in the 19th century was demanding but ordinary. Storms could lash the decks, soaking sailors to the bone. Calm seas could stretch into days of boredom, men repairing lines, mending sails, scrubbing decks. Meals were monotonous, sleep taken in cramped quarters. For the captain's family, the cabin offered a little more comfort: a bunk, a table, books to read to the child. Yet even here, the sea ruled all, every hour measured by the ship's bell, every day by the horizon. And then something happened. Something that drove them all into the lifeboat, leaving behind their ship. But what? One theory is that the alcohol cargo leaked fumes, alarming the crew. A few damaged barrels were found, their contents spilled. Alcohol vapors are highly flammable. Perhaps Briggs feared an explosion and ordered everyone temporarily into the lifeboat, tethered to the ship by a rope. A sudden gust, a snapped line or panic could have separated them, leaving them adrift as the Mary Celeste sailed on without them. Another theory points to weather. A sudden waterspout or squall might have convinced Briggs that the ship was in danger of capsizing. Flooding in the bilges may have been misjudged as more serious than it was. In the panic of decision, he may have chosen to abandon ship, only for the lifeboat to be lost. Some speculate about mutiny or piracy. Could the crew have turned on Briggs, killed him and his family, then fled? But the cargo and valuables remained untouched, and there was no sign of struggle. Others whisper of darker possibilities: sea monsters, curses, supernatural forces. Such ideas reflect more the imagination of later storytellers than the Rios. Lady of the Sea. The investigation at Gibraltar in 1872 found no evidence of foul play. The ship was eventually sold and continued to sail for years, though her reputation was haunted. For sailors, she was cursed, her name forever linked with disappearance. Daily life on the seas around her continued unchanged. Ships carried coal, cotton, timber and grain across the Atlantic. Crews endured storms, boredom, and the endless horizon. Families waited at ports, watching for sails on the horizon, scanning newspapers for shipping reports. The mystery of the Mary Celeste became a tale told in taverns and harbours, a warning that even experienced captains could vanish, that the sea held secrets beyond understanding. The fascination endures because the facts are so simple and so incomplete. A ship adrift, its crew gone, its cargo intact, its conditions sound. No message, no survivor, no trace. Every theory is possible, none proven. Each retelling adds to the legend, shaping it into one of the greatest maritime puzzles. To stand today on the waters near the Azores, the sea stretching blue in every direction, is to sense the vastness that swallowed them. The horizon offers no answers. Waves lap, gulls cry, and the wind fills the sails of modern ships as it did then. The Mary Celeste sailed into mystery, and her crew never returned. What drove them into the lifeboat? What fear or decision led them to abandon safety for danger? The questions remain unanswered, unresolved. The ship carried on without them, and we are left with silence, broken only by the sound of the sea. The Mary Celeste drifts in memory as a ship without crew, a vessel abandoned for reasons unknown. Now we turn to a landlocked mystery, one that unfolded not on open seas, but in the snowbound silence of the Ural Mountains in 1959. It is known simply as the Dyatlov Pass incident, named after the leader of a group of hikers who vanished in the cold and left behind a scene so strange that more than 60 years later, no single explanation has satisfied. In late January of 1959, 9 students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on a skiing and hiking expedition into the northern Urals. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student known for his discipline and skill. The group was experienced, well-prepared, and determined to complete a route that would qualify them for a high level of certification. They carried skis, tents, food and supplies packed into heavy backpacks. The journey began in Sverdlovsk, then moved by train and truck to the edge of wilderness. From there, the hikers skied into the mountains, through forests of pine and birch, their breath steaming in the cold air. Temperatures dipped well below freezing, snow piled deep on the slopes, winds howled across open ridges. Yet spirits were high. Diaries recovered later show jokes, songs and photographs of smiling faces. On the evening of February 1st, the group pitched their tent on the slope of a mountain known to the local Mansi people as Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain. The choice puzzled some later investigators, as the site was exposed and windy. Perhaps they wanted to avoid losing ground. Perhaps they miscalculated daylight. In any case, the tent was pitched, the stove assembled, and the hikers settled in for the night. They were never seen alive again. When the group failed to return as scheduled, a search party was launched. Weeks later, rescuers found the tees. It was still standing, but slashed open from the inside. Boots, coats, and supplies were left behind. Footprints led away into the snow, barefoot or in socks, some wearing only light clothing. The bodies were discovered in stages. 2 were found near a tree at the forest's edge, barefoot, dressed in underwear, with signs they had tried to build a fire. 3 more were found between the tree and the tent, as if trying to return, their bodies stiff in the snow. Months later, the remaining 4 were discovered in a ravine, buried under snow. These last bodies showed strange injuries: fractured skulls, broken ribs, internal damage without external wounds, and 1 missing eyes and tongue. The official investigation concluded that the hikers died of hypothermia, worsened by poor clothing and exposure. Yet the details refused to fit neatly. Why had they cut their way out of the tent instead of using the flap? Why had they fled without proper clothing in sub-zero temperatures? What caused the severe injuries in some, while others showed none? Theories multiplied. Some suggested an avalanche struck the tent, forcing them to flee. Others argued that katabatic winds, sudden, powerful gusts, terrified the group and drove them away. Some proposed that infrasound, low-frequency vibrations produced by wind through the mountains, induced panic. More sensational explanations invoked military tests, secret weapons, radiation, or even extraterrestrial encounters. None of these explanations has ever been confirmed. To imagine that final night is to step into a cold that numbs thought. The tent creaks in the wind, the stove crackles, the group eats a simple meal: bread, porridge, dried meat. Laughter fills the air. Diaries note jokes and small quarrels. Outside, snow sweeps across the slope. Stars burn in a black sky. Then, something. A noise. A pressure. A fear. Hands slash the tent. Bodies stumble out into snow, breath crystallizing in the air. They run toward the trees, hearts pounding, cold searing their skin. Some try to light a fire, others turn back. But the night is merciless. One by one, they fall silent in the snow. Daily life in the Soviet Union at the time moved on. Factories in Sverdlovsk clattered with machines, workers produced steel, trains carried goods across vast distances. Families lived in small apartments, children trudged to school in the cold. Propaganda posters urged discipline and progress. Few knew of the hikers' fate until later, when the story spread through whispers and newspapers. For their families, the search, the discovery, and the funerals were devastating. For others, the mystery was compelling, a riddle without solution. The Dyatlov Pass incident became part of folklore, retold in books, documentaries, and endless debates. Each new theory claimed to close the case, and each left questions behind. The tent remains preserved in photographs, the bodies in morgue reports, the diaries in archives, yet the silence between them is unbroken. To stand on Kholat Shakhl today is to feel the cold bite, the wind howl, the snow shift beneath your boots. The mountain is quiet, but it holds memory. Crosses mark the graves of the hikers, and visitors leave flowers. The mystery is not forgotten. Why did 9 experienced hikers flee their tent into certain death? Was it nature, fear, accident, or something else entirely? The snow holds its secret still, and the pass bears their leader's name. The Dyatlov Pass leaves us standing in snow and silence, a scene frozen in mystery. For our final journey, we turn not to mountains or seas, but to the sky itself, and to one of the most enduring disappearances of the 20th century. This is the story of Amelia Earhart, the pioneering aviator who set out to circle the globe in 1937 and never returned. Her plane vanished over the Pacific, leaving behind questions that still echo across oceans and decades. Amelia Earhart was already a legend before her final flight. Born in 1897 in Kansas, she discovered flying in her 20s and quickly rose to prominence as one of the first women to make long-distance solo flights. In 1932, she became the first woman to fly alone across the Atlantic. Newspapers hailed her courage, photographs of her smiling face appeared in magazines, and she became a symbol of modern possibility. With her leather jacket, flying goggles, and determined gaze, she embodied an age of aviation that was still young and daring. By 1937, Earhart set her sights on her greatest challenge, to fly around the world along the equator, covering nearly 29,000 miles. It would be a journey of endurance, navigation, and international cooperation. Her plane was a Lockheed Electra 10E, sleek and silver, fitted with extra fuel tanks. Her navigator was Fred Noonan, an experienced seaman and flyer. Together they departed from Oakland, California in May 1937, flying eastward through South America, Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. By late June they had reached Lai in Papua New Guinea. The next leg would be the most dangerous, a 2,500-mile flight over open ocean to Howland Island, a tiny speck of land barely 2 miles long. On July 2nd, they took off at dawn. The Electra's engines roared, the plane lifted into humid air, and they headed northeast into the Pacific. For hours, radio operators picked up signals from Ia. Raat. She reported her position, noted changing weather, and gave updates. As the flight wore on, her transmissions grew more urgent. Near their expected arrival time, she sent, "We must be on you, but cannot see you. Gas is running low." A final message crackled, "We are running north and south." After that, silence. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca, stationed near Howland to guide her in, never saw the plane. Search efforts began immediately, with ships and aircraft scouring thousands of square miles. But no trace of the Electra, Earhart, or Noonan was ever found. Why did they vanish? The simplest explanation is fuel exhaustion. Navigating over open ocean was difficult, and even with Noonan's skill, errors could grow across hours of flight. Clouds and weather may have obscured stars, limiting celestial fixes. Radio communication was patchy, hindered by technical issues and misunderstandings. Earhart may have missed Howland by only a few miles, her plane running out of fuel before she could find land. In this scenario, the Electra would have ditched into the ocean and sunk quickly. But other theories persist. Some believe they may have landed on another island, such as Nikumaroro in the Phoenix Islands. In 1940, skeletal remains and artifacts were found there, including a sextant box and pieces of a woman's shoe. Some argue these could have been Earhart's. More recently, expeditions have uncovered possible aircraft fragments, though none conclusively linked to her plane. The idea that Earhart and Noonan survived for a time on a remote atoll remains one of the most compelling possibilities. Other theories are more speculative. Some suggest they were captured by the Japanese, who controlled much of the Pacific at the time. In this view, Earhart may have been taken prisoner, her disappearance concealed. Others imagine secret missions, government cover-ups, or deliberate vanishing. Yet no definitive evidence supports these ideas. Daily life in 1937 carried on around the mystery. In the United States, families tuned radios, read newspapers, and followed the search with fascination. In ports across the Pacific, sailors and islanders saw search planes pass overhead. Farmers worked fields, children went to school, factories produced goods. Yet everyone seemed to know the name Amelia Earhart. Her flight was more than personal. It was symbolic of progress, of daring, of modern technology. Her disappearance was therefore not only a tragedy, but a wound to collective imagination. To imagine those final hours is to sit in the cramped cockpit of the Electra. The engines drone, fuel gauges dip lower, the horizon is endless water. Noonan scans charts, peering through sextant and maps. Earhart adjusts the controls, scanning for a speck of land. The radio crackles with faint voices, instructions half heard, bearings uncertain. The sun glares on waves below, clouds gather, anxiety sharpens, minutes stretch. And then, silence. Horizon unbroken, ocean vast. Her disappearance became a story retold again and again, each retelling shaping her into something more than human. She was a pioneer, yes, but also became a symbol of courage, of mystery, of the limits of knowledge. Memorials were built, books written, expeditions launched, yet the Pacific kept its secret. Today, Howland Island is uninhabited, a remote strip of sand visited rarely. The waters around it are deep, the seabed vast. Searchers still dream of finding the wreck of the Electra, resting silently beneath miles of ocean. Artifacts from Nicomaroro are studied, DNA tested, fragments compared. Each new attempt raises hope, but certainty remains elusive. The story of Amelia Earhart is not only about disappearance, it is about the human urge to reach beyond limits. Earhart sought not comfort, but challenge, not safety, but flight into the unknown. H.E.G. Her loss reminds us that progress is never without risk, and that even in an age of radios and airplanes, the world can still swallow us whole. And so we close our journey through these mysteries, from the buried secrets of Oak Island, to the empty decks of the Mary Celeste, to the snowbound camp in the Urals, to the vanishing plane over the Pacific. We have seen how the modern age still holds enigmas. The past 3 centuries have given us science, machines, and global networks, but they have not erased uncertainty. The world remains wide, and mystery endures. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart is not just a question of where a plane went down. It is a reflection of our longing for answers, our fear of silence, and our admiration for those who dare. Her flight ended in uncertainty, but her legacy continues, reminding us that to explore is to risk, and that some questions will always remain in the sky.